your background and how you got started in gardening.
Okay, listen, first of all, I want to thank Phil for all the work he's done with this organization and gathering us here today. And I also want to thank Stephen for inviting me to come out to his site since I moved to the San Antonio area. And I'm just excited about this whole event. And okay, a little bit about myself real quick. Okay, born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts. I was blessed to be raised by a sharecropper um, who had a gigantic urban garden in the heart of Roxbury, Massachusetts, which is in the heart of Boston. Now, this sharecropper from Ottawa, Tennessee, showed me how to grow. He showed me how to compost and all these different things. He was into food sovereignty. And so that was ingrained in me from when I was a child. And I always wanted to be a farmer when I grew up. I always said that. In 2008, I moved to Atlanta, Georgia, 2005. In 2008, I lost the job and had the opportunity to work with Truly Living Well in Atlanta, Georgia. That's Rashi Nuri. I worked with Metro Atlanta Urban Farm, which is Bobby Wilson. I also worked with, let me see, who else here? Oh, Phoenix Gardens. Atlanta was like a hotbed of agriculture, particularly for African Americans. And so I was part of that at its inception. And I had an opportunity to be a key component in that growth and movement. I did find out that many people, elders and young, had when you talked about growing food, there was an aversion to it. And I said, what's going on? What happened? And what I realized is that the first thing people think about is they think about slavery, they think about sharecropping. They do not recognize the innovations and the history that we have with the agricultural businesses that happen in America. And so Let's Grow was me honoring our forefathers with their accomplishments by showing our children and our elders and all of us their achievements. And so that's what Let's Grow is all about. And I think it's our duty to make sure that history is still moving forward and taught to our children forever. From Atlanta, I moved to Texas, and that's where I am today in the San Antonio area.
All right, man. We're glad you're here, man, and we plan to use you up a little bit. So stay tuned.
Yes, sir.
We need your help. So I'm gonna pass it on to you, Stephen. Can you share a little bit about your background and how you got into gardening?
Sure thing. Again, just blessed to be here. Wade, thank you so much for inviting me. We met maybe last week, and it's been fast and furious. So I thank you for that. Same with Uche on the back end. So my name is Stephen Lucke, CEO and founder of Gardopia Gardens. We are a grassroots nonprofit here in the South Central Texas region, where we teach people about healthy and sustainable living. I got into this work from a health lens and a health justice perspective. Playing sports as a youth, and then doing it as a young adult. I wanted to be as healthy as I could be. So selfishly, John Locke says, because of our selfishness, we can become selfless. And so I realized, with this knowledge around nutrition and physical activity that I had been privileged to gain, that I should share it with others. And so we were in an obesity epidemic. We are now in a pandemic. We're in a climate crisis, and these are two of the biggest challenges that our generations will face here in the 2000s. And I want us to make it to 2100 and beyond. And the only way that we can successfully do that, equitably do that, justly do that, is by first improving our health and improving our planet. And so I went down this wormhole, literally and figuratively, of urban agriculture, studying in college as a work study, and then eventually moving out into my community here in San Antonio on the east side and inner city of San Antonio, implementing garden-based learning with school districts and churches and community centers and restaurants and houses. We are now in our 8th year of operations. And my background, again, specifically is in biochemistry and nutrition, as well as organic farming. So thank you for having me, and looking forward to this conversation.
All right. Well, man, I'm so glad I'm so glad to have both of you guys in the same spot and just excited. Because we do, just like what you mentioned, we have such a big push right now. Just trying to get everyone, starting with our youth, but really getting everyone to grow, start learning the skill set of growing our own fresh food. That's something we found out the hard way when those supply chains got cut off during that pandemic. You know, all of a sudden
Hmm.
there was a big rush and a big level, a huge jump in level of interest on understanding really where our food comes from. And that goes for myself. I've learned so much, and hopefully I can learn a lot more just in this setting and continue to learn. And everyone who's on with us, the audience as well. You know, really, I want us to open up our ears and just kind of, you know, learn from some of these questions that we have, and really spark a movement of all of us, you know, learning the skill set of growing fresh fruits and vegetables that we can pass that skill set on to the next generation. So I'm gonna start off with I'm gonna be quiet here running my chops because I want to hear from y'all. And I'm gonna start off with my first question, and feel free to jump in. No special order, anything like that. Whoever wants to grab it first, and then if someone else wants to interject, great. If not, we'll move on to the next. But the first question I have from a list of some of the questions we compiled is, what are the first steps to starting a successful garden?
Wow. Can I, if you don't mind, I like to take this one because this is probably this is the most important step, and that is knowing your bioregion, knowing exactly where you are, understanding the features of where you live or wherever you plan to start your garden. Some people, they want to grow what they see their cousin in Miami's growing, or they might see somebody in Boston growing some wonderful fruit trees. But you are in a particular region and you need to know exactly where you are. Where does your water come from? What are some of the birds in your area? What kind of soil do you have? What time of the year is it? You know, you also need to study the microclimates around the place where you plan to have your garden. And if you like me right now, I live in an apartment, and so around my house, I have to study the bioregions. Where does the water fall off my roof? What kind of soil is in the backyard? Are there any animals and rodents that I need to be aware of? And so these are some of the things you need to be very, very aware of. I find that most people live in areas they really have no clue of where different things go and come from. Like, you know, when you flush your toilet or you run your water, where's that water come from? And so these are some of the basic things we should know. The birds, the animals, the seasons, you know, these are some of the things you should know. What are the native plants that were there before the Europeans showed up? There's a question here about like, what are some of the plants that I should plant in my garden? The first thing, another big step, this is a huge step, is to like investigate your nurseries. Go around to your nurseries, find out who your extension agents are. Go into their offices and they have a wealth of information free. They have classes free. And so you can get information before you just start planting your first before you start planting your vegetables and your fruits. And one last thing I do want to say is this: even though you call this me and Stephen experts, I'm pretty sure I can probably speak for both of us. We learned the hard way. You know, you can read everything you want in a book, you can see all the YouTube videos you like to see, but until you go out there and put your hands in the dirt, make a couple of mistakes, and then you learn and you realize that the people on the YouTube video, you know, they do the little editing, they have the picture perfect plants, but it doesn't always work out that way. And I know for a fact that I learned like over the years, just trying like fear not and just go out there and do things, because you can get paralyzed by the information. But, you know, when you go to the nurseries, for instance, they will have plants out that will be suitable for the time and region that you're in. They won't mislead you and say, here, try this. They have everything that will grow where you are. And so you can ask them questions, line up your resources. If you need soil, if you need manure, you know, find your places to get all these things and become very friendly. visit some farms like Gardopia, go visit them and see what they're doing, and just, like get a kind of head start when you're trying to grow. But definitely investigate where you are, microclimates, weather, time, what grows where you are. And these are just some of the things that come to mind.
Good word, man. Yeah, you're so right, and that goes for any kind of farming. And I probably should start off by saying farming is anyone who's growing anything. Okay, so that's what USDA uses the definition for. So if you're growing, you're considered a farmer. Okay, so I just want to put that out there because I know that's a broad term, but yes, any farmer who's been farming for any period of time will tell you that, yeah, it is trial and error, regardless of what you say. But I'm gonna be quiet here and see if Stephen wanted to hit on any of that question before we move on.
I don't have too much to add to that. I'll just say a lot of people will reach out to us who want to start a garden and they have a whole bunch of oak trees or pine trees or whatever. So making sure you have adequate light and understanding that you can grow in shade, but you might not start a cucumber farm, in a forest. So just something to consider. And water access is a big thing too. Like you may have a perfect plot, but if you don't have water, well, you're going to be doing some dry land farming, and we could talk about that, but it'll be a little different. So those are going to be your really key indicators of success is light and water for sure.
All right. So my next question is a foundational question. Some experienced farmers may think it's a silly question, but some of us are just getting started out. So I'm going to ask this question. It was moved down a little bit, but I'm gonna move it up. What is the difference between dirt and soil?
Okay, I can take.
No, you
go ahead.
You go. All right.
No.
Okay.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
Maybe we can ping pong a little bit.
Yeah.
So what I would say the difference between dirt and soil is dirt is something that you sweep up off your floor on a Sunday or Saturday doing chores, like all the lint, all the dog hair, the pebbles, the plastic, that is dirt. That's something I'm not going to grow with. That's something that's just dirty is what it is. It's dirty. You don't want that. We're trying to get rid of it. Soil is a living organism. It's earth. Here in South Texas, we might say tierra. So it's land. It's essentially the basis of life is what it is. And without healthy soil, none of us would be alive, actually. And so scientifically, soil is sand, silt, and clay. Sand is the biggest particle. Hopefully you've been to a beach. If you haven't, get out to one. And you might see some sand. And clay, you might have made a clay pot, you might have, put your feet in some clay or a clay mask, right? And so clay has a very specific property. It's the smallest particle. And then you have silt, something you might see on a river bank, a little bit more of a finer texture, a lot of minerals. So sand, silt, and clay, and there's a matrix. It doesn't have neo in it, but it is a triangle that will give you the different composition and percentages of your soil. And you can get your soil tested, and you can text it to Name AgriLife. You can send it to, I think it's TSO. There's a laboratory down in South Texas as well. So there's a couple of options to get your soil tested. And then there's also home soil test kits. And they're even easier. You can get a bottle of water and put your soil in it, and it'll actually separate into those different particles. That's the simplest thing you can do. But you also need air, so a little bit of aeration, and water, so hydration and aeration, and then organic matter. And I say organic matter is like that magic. That's when the soil comes to life, because if you have sand, or if you have clay, or you have silt, and that's it, you don't have air, and you don't have water, and you don't have organic matter, which is at 5%, then you're not going to be able to successfully cultivate anything. And most of the farmland in America has been degraded, and we've lost. When pre-European colonialism, there was about 5+% of organic matter in the farmland and across the nation. And a lot of these industrial agriculture farms are at less than 1%. So that's why they're using a lot of fertilizers and pesticides. So it's really important that we are taking care of our land, taking care of our soil. So that's what soil is to me.
All right, that's excellent feedback. Anything to add there, Uriah?
No, sir, I'm gonna leave that alone.
All right, we'll go to the next. Soil's my thing, so I had to get that question in early.
Yes, sir.
And we'll go deeper on that, because in my opinion, without soil, that's the base of everything. That's where it all starts. The world beneath our feet. So let me go to this next question here, so it might seem like I'm all over the place, because I am. I'm just throwing this out here. So how can I determine the best location for my garden?
Ooh, very good question. So Stephen mentioned earlier not growing a cucumber or plant or garden in the shade. So you have to determine, once again, the microclimates around your home, what areas are shady, what areas have sunlight, like good full sunlight, 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours worth of sunlight, and which areas have 3 or less. And then also the areas that have kind of like part sun and part shade. And then you can match the plants based upon their needs to those areas. So a lot of herbs, like shady areas, I wouldn't necessarily put it underneath a pine tree or even a walnut tree. But you have to figure out like where your shade, like for instance, I don't have any trees in my yard. But there are areas that get way more sunlight than others. So you need to study the area that you live in and find out what areas get what kind of sunlight. That is super important. That's a huge mistake that people make when they first start planting. They plant the wrong plants in the wrong area. Just like we have different places that we would like to be, how comfortable you like your house. Like for instance, I do not like air conditioning. I love it cool. I like the natural warmth of my house. Other people in the house like air conditioning, so we have a compromise, and therefore that area or air condition, I like to keep it maybe, I don't know, 72 degrees, something like that. But you have to figure out what your plants really like. That's one thing. Another thing I'll mention is this, and this is a big mistake I made when I first started this. Making sure that your plant, like when you look at the labels of seedlings, if you buy seedlings, or even if you have a seed packet, it will give a lot of information about how that seed, what kind of needs that seed has, or what kind of needs that plant has. And so when I first started, I'll never forget taking 2 tomato plants and planting them like about maybe 10 inches apart from each other. And so what happened is I had this tangled mess of tomato plants where I got barely any fruit from that because it was such a mess. And so I began to make sure that I read those labels, and I found out later on, you need a good 18 inches, almost 2 feet per tomato plant. They need a lot of space. And so these are some of the character traits of a tomato plant. So each plant has its own character traits. So as a beginning farmer, location, you need to make sure that you have the space to grow watermelons. If you're trying to do that, you have the space to grow whatever herb, fruit, or vegetable that you're trying to grow. And that way you'll have good success. That's just one thing. But the labels on those seedlings and the seed packets is super important. Some people neglect to look at those, and they learn the hard way. Either way, that's something big that you need to pay attention to.
All right, good feedback. If you don't have a pencil and pad out to take some notes on these great nuggets, again, that's okay. We're going to be sending you the recording for this, but great information that we're getting here. Stephen, anything to add, or should I move on to another question?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty comprehensive.
All right. You guys work good together, man. They're going to think we practice this.
Right.
Let's see.
We did.
I know. What's next on my list here? It says, how do I prepare the soil for planting?
Ooh.
That's a good one. There are different methods for preparing the soil, and it depends. Like, do you already have an established growing plot, or are you starting from scratch? So if you're starting from scratch, that's a little bit more intensive labor-wise. You might have to till it, you might solarize it. So tilling is, taking either a mechanical or manual implements and essentially disturbing the soil. You could disturb the soil 1 inch. You could just disturb the soil 12 inches. It just is, depending on the root system. Now, here in South Central Texas and probably a lot of the nation, you have something called Bermuda grass or crabgrass. And that stuff is extremely invasive. It's grassroots. There's a reason they say grassroots are strong, because they are. And they can go 36 inches in the ground. So even if you take out 12 inches of soil, there's still another 24 inches deeper that you're going to spend a lot of money and time doing that. So, sometimes what we'll do initially is we will remove like a 1 or 2 inches of the roots. So you're sort of like hitting a good knockout punch, right? But it's still going to get up from that knockout. So then we'll usually lay down cardboard. We'll lay down, a couple inches of cardboard. And then from there, you could start building your bed. You could, do like raised, you could do wood, you could do rocks or stones. You could just make a plot. You don't need a retaining structure. If you have more time, that's like, hey, I want to start a garden tomorrow. I just heard Stephen and Uriah talk. I'm ready. So that's if you're going to start tomorrow. If you're like, you know what, I got 6 months, I got some time. Then in the summer, I would take a black plastic or clear plastic, and I would cover the ground. And it's something called solarization. So I'm solarizing the ground. And so you're using the energy of the sun to burn the root structure. And you can kill that plant. You can kill a lot of it. And then you can take that tarp up in 3 to 6 months, and you could till it, just agitate it a little bit. You could take a broad fork, you could take a pitchfork, you could take a shovel, and just to aerate the soil, where I'm trying to add air to the soil at that point. And then I'm hydrating it with a little bit of water as well. So again, 25% air, 25% water. It's already going to be composed of something. So let's say that your soil is clay. We have clay here in San Antonio. Well, I'm going to be adding organic matter, and I'm going to be adding a little bit of sand too to help with that aeration, to help with the drainage. And then I'm going to continually do that. I do that probably about once a quarter. I add about 1 inch of compost to my beds. So it doesn't matter if you got a 4x4 raised plot or if you got a 100-foot row. I'm adding a little bit of compost to my bed to add those nutrients, and I'm adding fertilizer too. I am a certified organic farmer, and I use things like liquid seaweed, molasses, fish emulsion, humus, chicken manure, and a couple other items in the special sauce that helps you really create that fertility. You're trying to create fertility because the plants, are producing the ovary, which is the fruit that we're eating. If you already have a garden bed, you've already been doing this for a couple of years. Again, I'm adding an inch or so of compost, adding some fertilizers, making sure I have adequate moisture, and then I'm also possibly doing crop rotation. So I'm not planting the same thing, but that's sort of the next step. Uriah, you got anything else you do?
Let me see. Man, you said, so the question one more time is improving. How do you improve the soil? And if you want to start a garden, was that the question, Phil? I just want to make sure.
Yeah. How do I prepare the soil for planting?
Okay. One thing I would add, that was excellent answer, Stephen. I would also look, if it was like basically virgin, I never ever touched it and it's just there. I want to know what's growing there already. I want to see what kind of plants are there, and that will kind of determine, first of all, if you have like nice grass, or you might even have what we call weeds, but they're just plants that are, that just growing without human interference. And you might say, like, based upon what I'm looking at here, this is some great soil. You might have you might have clover growing there, dandelions, different things like that. And that will kind of determine what that soil also needs. Let me see, I can't think of anything else. You did mention about compost and manure. I think I mentioned very early that you want to find, I use a lot of rabbit manure in my gardens. Chicken manure is awesome. And so you want to line up the ingredients that you need to make your garden successful. If you can find different stables, different farmers, there's tons of them around us, right? If you can find somebody that will give you free manure, instead of going to Home Depot and buying and spending all your money, That is also a good thing to do too. You want to use some composted manure. Different, you got horse manure, you got cows, but chicken, I think chicken for sure needs to be composted. But like rabbit manure does not need to be composted. It can be used directly. So like just line up your ingredients that you need to have a successful garden.
All right, man. Good. You guys are hitting on some of these questions as we go, and I know we're starting to get folks raising their hands. So I'm gonna hit on a few more of them, more broader questions. One being, this is a very broad one. What are some of the common mistakes that beginning gardeners make that you see?
Well, I kind of touched that at the very beginning. It's just putting not following instructions. You get a plant, whether you bought it from a small nursery or not, they always have some type of label inside that plant. And then it's good to just ask the person who you bought it from, what are the best conditions to raise this plant? And they'll tell you, is going out blindly planting something where it should not be could be a very big mistake. I think I know you're going to talk about watering later on. A lot of people will overwater a plant and your beds, and they wonder why it's not looking too well. And I will mention that, don't just water for the sake of watering. In my small area, what I usually do is I'll use I'll use my finger and like stick it in the soil to see if it's moist or not completely dry. That will let me know, give me a guideline to water that raised bed or that container or my plots. Now, if that's just one thing I do. My thing is just don't overwater. And these are some things that people make mistakes doing. They just don't know any better. I'm thirsty, so the plant's thirsty, and they'll just overwater it, and sometimes they kill it. More plants die from overwatering than underwatering. I found out, especially house plants. And so that's just one thing. I think that's about it right there with that.
Okay. That's good stuff. And you did hit on one of the questions, so thank you for covering the water. And just so you guys know, if you jumped on a little bit after the housekeeping, we're holding questions to go ahead and raise your hand. We'll hold that till we finish with a few of these questions. I'm not going to get through all of them because I do want audience participation. So we'll get to you. So if you got your hand up, haven't forgot about you. We'll get you there, and then we also have some folks who are putting things in the Q&A as well. So Uriah, Stephen, you be ready to circle back to some of the things that you already mentioned before, because it sounds like they're raising questions as we go. But anything to add to that, Stephen, on some of the most common gardening mistakes that you're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, overwatering, underwatering, too much fertilizer, too little. It's either too much or too little. It's hard to find Goldilocks right in the middle. So yeah, that's my comment.
All right. Let me get on some of these that it sounds that some of these paths we haven't gone down. One being, what are some effective, and thank you, Stephen, for talking about, one of the questions was, what are some of the effective organic fertilizers? Can you repeat that one more time, just the list of some of the organic fertilizers, because a lot of people don't associate some of the things that you said. Most of us, when we hear the word fertilizer, we're thinking that stuff you buy at Home Depot that's sitting in a jug. So can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, definitely. So soil fertility is really going to be key to production. I always tell people, they call me like, oh, my plant's not growing, my plant's not healthy. I'm like, when's the last time you fed your plant? They're like, feed my plant? Like, that's what soil's for, right? Well, you get hungry, your plants get hungry too. And so you have to feed your plants, right? And I like my plants fat, so I'm gonna feed them a lot. The idea is that we are providing the macros and the micros. So if you know your macros as a human nutrition, it's fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, right? And then our micros are our vitamins and minerals. Well, same thing for plants, but theirs are a little different. Their macros are nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, NPK. And Texas A&M AgriLife has researched that fruits and vegetables prefer a 19:5:9 ratio. You can't find an organic 19:5:9. There is a synthetic and it works really good, but you can't find an organic one. So there used to be ladybug fertilizer. It was an 8:2:4. So if you did a double portion, it would give you a 16:4:8. That's pretty darn close. But that being said, you got to sort of mix and match. You start playing chemist using these different nutrients to hit those ratios that you're looking for. And different plants prefer different ratios. You know, blueberries are going to like something different than blackberries, which is going to like something different than asparagus, which likes something different than Swiss chard. But NPK, 19:5:9, trying to get to that ratio. And then your micros, so that's your calcium, your silicone, your magnesium, your iron, right? So all these different micronutrients and trace elements are needed as well. So bone meal is high in phosphorus, blood meal is high in nitrogen. You have rock phosphate is high in phosphate. Manure, most manures, bat guano is high in nitrogen. And then you have your micros and your trace elements, things like liquid seaweed. Liquid seaweed's like a 001 or something. You're like, why am I going to use this? But it has these other trace elements and phytonutrients that are beneficial. Azomite, it's mined in Utah. A to Z minerals, it's 32 trace minerals, right? So you need to supplement your soil because a lot of times it doesn't have what it needs. Like I said, molasses is a sugar, a carbohydrate, which is feeding the microbes in the soil so that they can break down because they need to digest these minerals and these elements so that they're bioavailable for the plants. So you have to feed the decomposers in addition to feeding your plants. Those are a few that we use.
All right, good stuff here. I'm going to hit one more question. I know we have a lot that I didn't get to, but that's okay. I want audience participation here. So one more question along the lines of pests. It says, what are some effective pest control methods?
Ooh, okay. There are several handmade, do-it-yourself, I should say, materials that I use. One of them you can buy and you should buy. Somebody in the questions mentioned the ants are tearing my plants up. Oh, hold on, let me open that up. The ants are eating my young plants as they come up. How do I stop them? Normally, what I use is diatomaceous earth on the plants. I'll put it. If you have a used salt shaker or something like that, fill it up with diatomaceous earth. Sprinkle all around your plants. And I would also take a shovel and I might just kind of like open up that anthill, pour a bunch of that diatomaceous earth into it and close it back up. And that will help kill some of those ants. Stale, like if you have a snail or what's it other thing, snail and slug problem, stale beer, if you put those in flat, like little, what do you call, like little containers, you can, that attracts the snails and the slugs, and they usually, they love that beer. They go to it and they usually drown inside that beer. And then I use a garlic spray on a lot of my plants. And garlic is one of those type of things that a lot of insects do not like. Now, it will also keep away your beneficial insects. So, like once it rains, also when you use the garlic spray, it will wash away once it rains. You have to go back out and do it again. But I know that one of the questions you had on here, Phil, was about beneficial insects. And I want to say that garlic spray will actually kind of like drive away your beneficial insects along with your pests. And so, and those are three things that I do it yourself. I don't really like the pesticides that are made that you can buy in the stores, because those pesticides will also affect you if it's a chemical pesticide. You got to be careful of that. They haven't really begun to show the damage that these pesticides are doing to us. The herbicides and pesticides that we eat every single day. We have like a lot of diseases that come from that. And we need to talk about that too. But those are three things that I do as far as keeping pests away.
All right, good stuff. Stephen, you want to hit any of that or?
Just to piggyback on it, like as he mentioned, when you start spraying chemicals, so integrated pest management, right? You start with cultural control, and then mechanical control, and then biological control, and the last thing you're going to do is chemical control, and it's a triangle. And so you want to try to set up your systems so that your plants are healthy first and foremost, right? Give them that nutrition, and for the most part, a healthy plant can fight off mostly anything. Now, if you're doing a monocrop and you got all corn, you might be out of luck if there's a disease in the soil. If you're doing all tomatoes, so polyculture, creating a diversity in your growing space is also going to assist with pest control. Pollinator gardens, plant you a pollinator garden.
There you go. We're on it, man. I got a special guest coming up in May, Justin Duncan, and we're gonna be talking some of that pollinator garden stuff. So definitely good stuff there. Well, what I'm gonna do, Uche, I don't know if you are on, but if so, if you could look in the Q&A and read out a few of those questions.
Hey everyone, yes, I am here, and think of me as the man in the background. We have a question from Mr. Charles Russell, and it says, I planted mustard greens about 2 years ago, and they went to seed. I have started on my spring garden, and the mustard greens are coming by very thick and overgrowing my corn, watermelon, and okra. How do I stop the mustard greens?
How do I stop? First of all, I like to get some of those mustard greens. They're in high demand. I really like mustard greens, but I would, something. If they're coming up, first of all, I would probably like take a shovel and really like dig up the root systems around those guys. I might plant around them. I might design my bed to go around those, but it sounds like you don't want them there, period. Is that the case? Oh, he's not on. He can't. I like to hear if
he can. Who was that? I can get them. I can unmute them if you'd like me to. Who was that, Uche?
Mr. Charles Russell. Charles Russell.
All right, Charles, I'm going to attempt to unmute you.
Okay, am I on now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, right now, when I say they have taken over the garden, it almost look like a front yard full of grass. And they weren't there when I started. They weren't there when I started the garden because I tilled it and turned the ground over and all that, and they weren't there. And once I started planting my watermelons and my okra and my corn, about 3 weeks later, they just started coming up as a drove, and they have covered the entire area, and it's a 50 by 60 area. And they just started coming back. And
Mr. Russell, I'm gonna tell you this. You might not want to hear this. You might have to get out there, like besides digging them up, you might just have to pull them up. Just pull them up.
I've done that around the okra, around each one of those plants that I've done. I've done it around the okra, just cleared an area around that, but that's only around the actual plant.
Okay.
And so now I'm getting ready to start putting down my purple hull peas, but I'm definitely going to have to dig them up with the tiller, but I know they're going to come back. I just understand it.
Look, this is good because it's also a very valuable lesson in here too. And that valuable lesson is, sometimes like when you have your cool season garden out there, right? And like if you for some reason you kind of neglect it and it just like overgrows, and next thing you know, it like really gets warm and those plants begin to bolt, and next thing you know, you have some seed pods on those plants and the seeds are going everywhere. This is the reason why like a lot of people like this is what happened with Mr. Russell. The plants came to seed, next thing you know, they're all over the place. And so like it's a good lesson. And I went through the same thing once or twice. But what I found out was I took a shovel, whatever, and really dug it all up the best I could. I used the action hoe to basically like hold the ground up and try to get those mustard plants or whatever plant it was from out the soil. That's the best. That's the best you have to get. You have to use some elbow grease on that.
All right, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, Uche, we have anyone else? Any other questions?
Yes, we do. We have one from Nikki, and she says, and I believe this she was pertaining to the best way to plant a garden, but she was talking about what if you are using a container garden? And I believe she was talking about what challenges with planting a garden using a container garden.
I can take that one. So
Yeah.
what challenges happen with container gardening? Is that what it is?
Yes.
Okay, so container gardening, sometimes we got to do it, right? You might have a patio, you might have cats or dogs, you know, you might be in a colder atmosphere where you got to pull some plants in the wintertime. So, you know, it is something. I have a little container garden. I got like a little Zen garden, Serenity garden, where I got some tropicals that we put in pots. So, you know, one thing is size. So knowing what you planted, Uriah said it earlier, each plant has its own characteristics, has its own genetics, which means it has its own, you know, potential for growth. And so, you know, a tree, if you're trying to put trees in a pot, you need a big pot, you know, 20, 25, 50 gallons or more. And then that comes with its own issues because that weighs a lot. So you might need to have some wheels on it so that you're not trying to pick up a 1,000-pound pot. And then for like tomatoes, peppers, most of your annuals that most, you know, folks are growing in a seasonal garden. You know, I try to go nothing lower than 3 gallons, but probably closer to 5 gallons. Like think about a paint bucket, because the roots do need expansion room. So you can't grow, you know, a full grown tomato in a gallon unless you're doing hydroponics. And so that's another thing. You know, you can start moving into soilless mediums. And there's something called a self-irrigated planter, which essentially is a pot that has a reservoir. Think about a pot that has an aquifer at the bottom of it of 3 to 6 inches. Okay, so now it's holding water. You don't have to water as much. There's a cool company out of Vancouver called Life Space Gardens, but there's other companies as well. So they make self-irrigated planters that make it a little bit easier for hydration, because I think one thing also was mentioned earlier is about too much or too little watering. So containers can dry out pretty quick, especially if you have holes at the bottom of it and you don't have a tray or something to collect that water. Well, by the afternoon, your plant has drank all that water. So now you're watering twice a day by hand. It just gets a little bit cumbersome. You know, if you have a big space, if you got 2 plants, all right, that's not an issue, right? But this is if you're trying to get more into the production mode. You know, the other thing is just soil, again, nutrients. You become that parent, that plant's parent. You know, when you put it in the ground, Mama Nature takes care of it for you for the most part, right? As long as you set up the conditions properly. But when you start doing container gardening, now you are Mama Nature, and you have to really, you know, keep your eyes on that plant. Airflow, a lot of people do indoor gardening. So do you have clean air, right? Do you have good light? Those are some things to think about with container gardening. I don't know, you got anything you want to add?
I want to ask. She said container, so I was thinking like of a container raised bed. I wonder if she meant like, you know, maybe outside, or is it outside or is it inside? Can we have her? Can we get her? Can we get her audio?
What's the name, Uche? We're gonna
Nikki. Nikki.
Okay, Nikki, we're gonna ask you to.
I see two Nikki. Oh, I see one Nikki. Okay.
Hi. I was talking about pots because I have a container garden and I was wondering what I would need to do to start over fresh.
Mm. So Nikki, you just have a pot, like maybe a 5-gallon or something smaller than that, and you want to plant something in it. Is that what you're saying?
I have several 5-gallon pots and then really small green plastic pots. So that's why I was asking that question.
And you want to know like what's the best way to get started with those, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The first thing, I think Stephen really nailed it. He said, he mentioned, first of all, you have a sunny area based upon the plant's needs. You have an area in your house or on your porch that's going to get the adequate amount of sunlight for that plant. I would also look for a good potting mix to make sure that your plants are well fed. Let me see one other thing. Stephen made a really good point that the plants that are in pots, they will dry out very quickly. And a lot of people don't know that. And, they'll look at their plants and they'll be drooping over because, you have to, once again, you need to check your soil with your finger to make sure that it needs watering. And in a really warm climate, those plants will like become dehydrated and they do need water. You have to pay attention to them. Don't water for the sake of watering, but definitely be on top of them because they will dry out. If they're in like direct sunlight, if they're on a porch area, if it's very warm, you have to stay on top of that. But the potting mix, and I don't have any suggestions for it because I kind of make my own potting mix, but is there something, Stephen, you might know that you can buy, like potting mix that you would recommend?
There's a couple of different companies. I know a lot of people like to use Happy Frog. It's really expensive for like a couple cubic feet. I use Kellogg's from Home Depot. Kellogg's has a couple of different mixes that I like for my raised beds. They make an organic raised bed vegetable garden mix. It's white and green, but they make a potting soil mix too that's green. pink and yellow, I want to say, stripes. I used to use Stay Green over at Lowe's as well, but perlite, you need a little bit of perlite for aeration. Vermiculite, you might have some, and then some compost and a little bit of clay, and that's going to help. Not too much clay, like 5 to 10% maybe, just to help with soil with moisture retention. But a lot of people use peat moss, sphagnum moss to hold moisture as well.
Coconut.
Yeah, cocoa core. Yeah.
Cocoa core. It's really inexpensive, depending on where you get it from, I guess. Nikki, did that answer your question? Oh, she's gone.
Okay. She's gone.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks so much, Nikki.
We have another question from Sarah Beams, and she says, "Thank you for giving off your time and expertise, gentlemen. I am a beginner in the learning and planning stages right now. I would love to know your thoughts on using elevated planters/beds for those who are unable to get down on the ground. I'm particularly interested in growing veggies. Thank you."
Once again, the watering is very important with that. Like she's saying, a raised planter. So it's just like a giant pot, elevated. And you want a good potting mix once again. I do want to mention that most vegetables, unless it's a root crop, need about a good 6 to 7 inches of soil. You don't need to make it super duper deep, like maybe, some people will plant something so deep into the soil, but it really only needs like 6 inches of soil to properly grow. And so the planters do not have to be that deep. And that's one major thing. Let me see, those unable to get down the ground, and also just be on top of the watering of it. just being on top of the watering, along with your soil mix. That's all I have for that.
So I guess I have a couple of things. Like you're saying, if you have trouble, ADA compliance is around 30 inches. We've made beds up to 24 inches. I find that the closer to the ground is, the better it grows. But we've had success when we build our planters 24, 30 inches. There are some pre-made fabricated garden kits that you can purchase online that have legs. Just imagine a table, right? A table, but it's a garden table essentially. And there's some cool kits that you can purchase that way as well. So whether you build it yourself or whether you buy it pre-made, those are a couple of options to get it a little bit higher off the ground.
Right. We have another, this is from Earl Bullock. Okay, I guess he has a picture that he would like to share. Earl, we will get back to your question shortly. So we don't have a picture from him, but I'll move on to the next one. We have Nicholas Tillman. What are the best size for raised beds? Our plot is a mix of rocky/sandy loam, I believe, loam.
I could take the lead on this. So for when you say a raised bed, you're basically talking about you have a raised bed, then you have a container raised bed. And so I'm thinking that he's speaking about the container raised bed. Like a big like a let's say a rectangle on the ground that you made a raised bed that you're going to grow vegetables in. I'm just going to assume that's what he's talking about. Is it possible we can get him on too?
Yes. Can you repeat that name, Uche?
Nicholas Loam.
All right, Nicholas.
Nicholas Tillman.
Nicholas Tillman. Yeah.
We're coming to you, Nicholas.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. Yeah, so I was thinking about cedar boxes. I was just trying to get the right dimensions for it. Like the plot that we have, there's a lot of rock in certain places, and we have that sandy loam kind of soil. And you spoke about dirt a little earlier. I always call it dirt because I'm tired of it. Yeah, I was just trying to see the right dimensions for that. I've heard so much stuff and seen a lot of things on the internet, but I'm just trying to hear from people that actually are doing it.
Okay. So what I would suggest, and this is what I normally do, my beds are at the most 3 feet, about 3.5 feet or 3 feet wide. Let's think about this table. I'm looking at a table right here, 6 feet by 3 feet. And so my beds are going to be about the same thing. I do not want a bed that's like a gigantic, square, because I want to be able to reach into my garden comfortably and harvest what I need to from the other side. I want to be able to work around my garden without it being, you should not have to walk inside your garden bed. Okay. And then on top of that, the depth of it it can be higher than 6 inches, but I usually do about maybe 6 inches deep on my garden beds. I don't unless you're doing something. I have created beds, raised container beds that were higher than that. But if it's on the ground, I'm going to do it at the most probably 6 inches deep and 3 feet by maybe. You can go as long as you want. I've made beds 3 feet by 10 feet, and so that's a very comfortable and very useful size for a bed. You want to make sure that you can work around it comfortably. Did that answer your question, Nicholas?
Most definitely.
All right.
Appreciate
Thanks so much, Nicholas.
We have another question from Billy Wright. I am in Central Texas. Do I need to cover my watermelons if it gets over 100 degrees? Should I mulch them? And if so, what is the best thing to use?
Well, I'm not a watermelon farmer, but I have grown a few watermelons in my day. And so, watermelons can take the heat. Definitely, don't suffer too much. Now, we hit 108 on the Fahrenheit. That's not the heat index last summer in July. And it was a little tough, but okra, watermelons, southern peas, sunflowers, those can all take pretty high temps for the most part. Another one is sweet potatoes can take those high heat temps in the summer. Mulching, I think, for me is always a good idea. Now, how much mulch varies. You might want to do more of a light mulch in summertime. You want to make sure that your soil can breathe, but you want to hold that moisture in, right? So you're holding that moisture in, you're protecting the microbes, and so you can have a really healthy soil. With that moisture, of course, we know that watermelons need 1 to 2 inches a week, easy, to produce, especially when they're flowering. And so making sure that you have some type of drip line. You probably don't want to do a sprinkler system if you can avoid it, just because those leaves are so big, and they can, if you water at the wrong time, they can cause fungus, or they can cause almost a lens on it to magnify the sun. So yeah, those are a few of my watermelon tips.
Okay, we have another question from, this is Earl Bullock. I guess he has, perfect. Earl Bullock says, my mustard greens were planted in seed pods back on the 8th of March. They are still very tiny. Is that due to lack of watering, or are they still too young? I plan to transplant them into my raised beds.
You plan to, okay. First of all, mustard greens that's a cool season crop. And so we're coming into a really warm part of the year. Are they in a really shady area? Can we get him on also? I would love to hear people's questions, because sometimes you lose something in the texting here.
We sure can.
Yeah.
Earl Bullock.
Good evening, and thanks again for this very informative session that you're having. I had planted, as I mentioned earlier, these in little seed pods, and they were growing well. And to answer your question, it is a very shaded area, and I'd like to see if they're going to, they're like very, very thin. They're all together. And if they're going to grow a little larger, then I would like to transplant them into my raised bed. So basically, that's the question that I had.
Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. But you said that they're not as big as you would like them to be right now. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes, they actually look like little micro greens. They're very, very, very small. So they're too small for me to even try to spread them out or separate them. I would probably have to take a pair of tweezers in order to separate them. So they're just too small.
Question. So you planted these March 8th, correct?
Yes. Yes.
And what kind of soil are you using? It sounds like they're not getting the they should be a lot bigger than they are now.
I am using the starter seed soil for starting seeds that I bought from Walmart. So they're this very loose soil that they sell for seed starting, and that's what I'm using.
Wow, that's a good one. Stephen, you have any suggestions, sir?
Well, like you said, they're a leafy green, and so you're getting a little late into the season. You might want to put a shade cloth on them. Get them you're going to put them into the ground, it sounds like. So hopefully they'll have plenty of room to expand and fertilize there. A lot of times, we put a fertigator, which is a fertilizer injector, into our drip line irrigation system. So our plants essentially get an IV drip fertilizer, and so that might be something to juice them up a little bit to get them out. They seem to be stunted at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
And we have a final question from Billy Daniel. And it says, my mango tree plant is very yellow and dropping. What can I do to revive it?
And drooping. Yeah. What can I do to revive it? Once again, I would love to hear his voice. But I will say, I would like to know, how old is this tree? How long ago did he plant it? And is it getting adequate sunlight? Is it, what kind of soil does he have this plant in? Can we get his voice also, please?
Yes.
Billy Daniel.
Uche, name again? Sorry.
Billy Daniel.
Billy.
Billy, okay. I had two Billies here, so I wanted to make sure I got the right one.
Sounds like he may be overwatering it too.
Billy, are you there?
You're on. All right.
Billy, feel free to unmute yourself. Billy is typing in the Q&A. He says, I've had the mango for a while. I think the soil may not be the best.
Hey, Billy, this is a scary question. Are you watering the mango tree enough? Do you think, in your estimation, if you were to touch the soil, right, take your finger and stick your finger in the soil like this, what are you going to feel? Is it moist and cool, or is it dry?
And also, what nutrients are you using?
What nutrients?
You might have a nutrient deficiency. You might have a nutrient toxicity. So, water and nutrients are always the culprit, pretty much, unless it's sunlight.
Oh, Billy said he watered and transplanted yesterday.
Oh, so he's kind of shocked. The plant is a little bit, you got to give it some time to rebound.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Billy, you just have to, Mr. Dan, you have to give it an opportunity to rebound. It'll bounce back.
He also added, I'm looking at adding nitrogen fertilizer to the bed.
And I assume this is in a pot. Is this, if it's in a pot, that's another thing. It's tough to grow mangoes. I don't know where you're at. If you're in the tropical region, then maybe you can grow them. But a lot of regions of the United States, aside from maybe like Florida and Cali, it's a little tough. Unless you have a greenhouse. If you got a greenhouse, then you can grow anything.
Billy's in Dallas right now.
Yeah, not a lot of mangoes in Dallas. But that being said, it can be done.
Yeah,
get a big pot for them. Bring them in the winter time, and plenty of nutrition. And like you said, it's shocked probably at this point.
Billy likes the idea of a greenhouse.
All right.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I think that is our final question. Thank you, Billy Daniel.
All right. I guess we'll keep things moving along. Man, those were such great nuggets, and love the questions that were out there. And we definitely, if we can corner you two again, definitely will. If you don't mind, I'll be reaching out again here sometime in the very near future. This forum, and just having the opportunity to ask these type of questions, it to me is just priceless, and just really happy to see so many growers across Texas, and hopefully this will we'll jump on here one day and we got 100, we got more questions than we can handle. So truly appreciate that. I do want to shift gears a little bit, and before we adjourn, just to share that a couple items to save the date coming up on May 2nd. I kind of let the cat out of the bag a little bit, but we'll be having Justin Duncan from NCAT. He'll be joining us and touching on more information, kind of picking back off of the fruits and vegetable conversation. And the title of that knowledge forum will be "What's Going On in Your Garden?" So we'll take a deeper dive, a little bit different format, more of a workshop, PowerPoint, instructional format, but we always like to switch things up a little bit. And we thought that this format actually would be a great segue into our next knowledge forum. Now, for our cattle ranchers, our livestock folks, we haven't forgot about you. We're going to still be mixing in those knowledge forums as well. So please jump on. But we're big believers that before you can ever create healthy soils large scale, we have to start and learn it the small scale, so we don't go broke as farmers, because as we all know, farming can be pretty expensive. So we do encourage you to learn, even if you're a livestock person. Please learn these skills and techniques. And if you were on today, you probably heard something that you didn't even realize. And that's really what these knowledge forums are all about. So keep tuning in. And we do encourage you, if you know anyone, family, friends that need to be on these knowledge forums just to get information, that's what it's all about. That's why we're here. So for those of you who did not get a chance to attend last Tuesday's local food purchase program info session and are interested in getting a little bit of that information, I did put in the chat a link. Hopefully you have access to the chat. I did put a link in there. We'll also send that out during our post event email that we typically send out with the recording of today. So be on the lookout for that. Also, because we've been getting such a strong demand to get together to just kind of congregate. That was actually our organization's bread and butter, and then the pandemic hit and we went virtual. And thank you guys so much for bearing with us and learning how to work a mouse and on your computer versus getting face to face. But we are looking to possibly do teaming up with Black Gold Resourcing LLC and EHCU Public Relations. Uche who's on here right now I'm probably getting a little ahead of myself because we're still in the early sessions, but stay tuned. Looks like we're planning something right around the Father's Day holiday in mid-June, and location to be determined, but stay tuned. I figured I'd cue that up and that probably put a little pressure on us to make sure it happens. So stay tuned for that. We'll get more information out. Be sure to be checking your weekly newsletters that we send out, and visit our website on the event page. We'll try to make sure we keep that updated for any upcoming events. But again, May 2nd is the next event here. So with that said, I want to say another special thanks to our guest panelists today, Uriah Israel and Stephen Lucke. Thank you guys so much. And also a special thanks to our team at Texas Small Farmers and Ranchers Community-Based Organization. And until next time, be the exception. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Phil.
Yes. Look forward to connecting in the future.
Appreciate y'all.